She had everything the camera could adore: diamonds, wit, and a walk that made censors sweat. But behind the feathers and firelight, Mae West's story wasn't only about pleasure, it was about punishment. For every line that made audiences laugh, she paid a quiet price when the laughter stopped. How did a woman who rewrote the rules of desire end up silenced by the very industry she built? Tonight we follow the real Mae West, the rise, the rebellion, and the loneliness she never confessed. Mae West was born in Brooklyn in 1893, in a neighborhood where the streetlights burned long after curfews, and where ambition was a matter of survival. Her father, Battlin' Jack West, was a prize fighter who taught her toughness. Her mother, Matilda Tilly West, was a former corset model who spotted talent early. Together, they gave her two conflicting gifts: bravado and showmanship, and a belief that fame could protect a woman from the world's cruelty. Mae performed in church halls and backyard carnivals before most children finished grade school. By age 10, she was already impersonating adult performers, singing blues numbers that scandalized local audiences. She had something raw, one early promoter said, not just beauty nerve. That nerve became her currency. The stages of vaudeville taught her more than acting. They taught her survival. Male managers demanded obedience. Theater owners controlled pay, and audiences expected charm. Mae delivered, but always with a twist. She learned how to turn vulgarity into elegance, how to weaponize suggestion. "I didn't discover curves," she later said. "I just made them fashionable." By her 20s, she was known as Baby Mae, the queen of New York's risque vaudeville scene. But Mae wasn't satisfied playing someone else's words. She began writing her own sketches under the pseudonym Jane Mast, giving herself the kinds of roles no man would dare write for her strong, sexual, witty, and unashamed. Then came the play that changed everything. In 1926, she wrote and starred in Sex, a raw body story of a sex worker navigating hypocrisy. It was a sensation. Theaters sold out. The press exploded. But moral reformers, led by the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice, wanted her stopped. One night, the police raided the theater mid-performance. Mae was handcuffed backstage and dragged through the rain, still in costume. The photo of her smiling at her arrest pearls gleaming, chin high, became one of the most iconic images of the decade. She was sentenced to 10 days in jail on Welfare Island. She served 8 with perfect posture, reportedly tipping her jailers and dining with the warden. "I found the jail quite charming," she quipped. But she never forgot the humiliation. She once confided to a friend, "They didn't arrest me for immorality, they arrested me for independence." That arrest, ironically, made her a star. Hollywood came calling. 1932. She was 39 in age when most actresses were told to retire, but Paramount saw in her something no one else had: power. America was mired in the Great Depression. Audiences were desperate for laughter, rebellion, fantasy. Mae West offered all three. In her debut film, Night After Night, she transformed a bit part into a phenomenon. When a hostess compliments her jewelry, Mae shoots back, "Goodness, what lovely diamonds." She purrs, "Goodness had nothing to do with it, dearie." That line became legend. She wasn't just performing, she was declaring ownership of her sexuality. In She Done Him Wrong, 1933, and I'm No Angel, 1933, she wrote much of her own dialogue and handpicked her co-star, a young unknown named Cary Grant. The chemistry between them was electric. The film saved Paramount from bankruptcy, grossing millions during an economic collapse. For a brief, glittering moment, Mae West was the most powerful woman in Hollywood. Her scripts were hers, her image hers, her income rivaled only by Chaplin's. She was the first actress to own her likeness rights, the first to dictate camera angles, the first to tell producers, "You can't fire me, I am the show." But power in Hollywood has always been conditional, especially for women. The backlash came fast. Religious organizations condemned her as dangerous. Politicians blamed her for corrupting American morals. In 1934, the Production Code Administration, Hollywood's self-censorship body, tightened its rules directly because of her films. Phrases once celebrated were now banned. Double meanings were dissected. Scripts were slashed to ribbons. She was too free for the system she'd enriched, a historian later wrote. Mae didn't crumble. She adapted. Her later 1930s films, Klondike Annie and Go West Young Man, carried more subtle wit, but the critics turned cruel. They called her act tired, her humor too bold for the new era. Inside, Mae seethed. She'd built an empire on audacity, and now she was being asked to apologize for it. Publicly, she kept her swagger. Privately, the strain grew. Colleagues recalled her mood swings, her increasing mistrust of studio executives, and her heartbreak over being branded vulgar. Friends said she longed for love but feared vulnerability. Men pursued her, but few could match her confidence or survive it. Her relationship with boxing champion George Raft, often rumored though never confirmed, left her disillusioned. In later years, she would refer to her lovers not as men but as amusements. It was easier that way. Love, she said, is like bridge. You need a good partner or a good hand. But behind the jokes was fatigue. She was a woman who had turned pain into performance for decades, and the mask was getting heavy. By the early 1940s, the war had changed everything. The world wanted patriotism, not provocation. May's humor felt out of a step. In 1943's The Heat's On, her jokes were censored, her co-stars miscast, and her patience gone. When the studio tried to edit her script without permission, she walked away. That walkout effectively ended her film career. May returned to live theater, taking her cabaret act to Las Vegas and London, performing to packed rooms. But something had shifted. Audiences were now laughing at her as much as with her. The exaggerated drawl, the sequined gowns, they were becoming caricatures. Still, she refused to retire. She said, "I'm a woman of a certain age, but I'll never be an age certain." In 1959, she moved into her Los Angeles apartment, a penthouse filled with mirrored walls and orchids, and rarely left. She surrounded herself with trusted assistants, controlled access tightly, and refused to be photographed in natural light. She claimed daylight aged people faster. Guests recalled how she spoke only from her chaise lounge, bathed in golden lamps that recreated the glow of her 1930s close-ups. To outsiders, it was eccentric. To May, it was survival. She had built an image so powerful that to appear ordinary felt like betrayal. And yet, the 1960s brought something unexpected. Feminism was rising. Younger women writers, artists, radicals began rediscovering her. Gloria Steinem called her the woman who taught America to say yes. Magazines that once mocked her now printed retrospectives hailing her as the grandmother of sexual liberation. When reporters asked her about the new women's movement, May smiled and said, "Honey, I was the movement before they moved." It was half bravado, half truth. She inspired generations of women who refused to be silenced. But the resurgence also brought new pain. Scholars analyzed her life as symbolism. Journalists called her a feminist icon, without meaning to be one. May resented that. She believed she had always meant it. Then came the ill-fated comeback. In 1970, at 77, she agreed to star in Myra Breckinridge. Gore Vidal's novel was controversial, satirizing Hollywood and gender roles territory May once ruled. But on set, chaos reigned. She reportedly refused to appear in the same frame as Raquel Welch, demanded her lines be rewritten, and insisted on lighting filters to blur her wrinkles. When the film premiered, critics called it a grotesque time capsule. May was devastated. Friends said she never recovered from that humiliation. She stopped attending premieres, stopped granting interviews except to hand-picked journalists, and spoke only through rehearsed quips. Yet her faith in her legend remained unshaken. "I'm a legend," she said, "because I survived all the men who said I couldn't." Her relationship with Paul Novak, her loyal companion until the end, became her anchor. He adored her, protected her, and reportedly shielded her from cruel news coverage. In later interviews, he said, "May didn't get old. She just got private." Still, privacy has its cost. In her final years, she grew increasingly frail. She suffered 2 strokes, one in 1973 and another in 1978, leaving her partially paralyzed and struggling to speak. Yet she insisted on making Sextet 1978, her last film, shot when she was 85. Surrounded by much younger co-stars, May once again controlled her dialogue and insisted on romantic scenes rewritten to flatter her. The result was surreal half-comedy, half-ghost story. Watching it today feels like seeing May perform against time itself, refusing to surrender her image. When Sextet flopped, she retreated completely. The woman who once walked into studios and dictated contracts now sat in silence, curtains drawn. The mirrors in her home were covered with lace. Visitors said she sometimes repeated old movie lines to herself, as if rehearsing for a scene no one would ever shoot. Mae West died in November 1980, aged 87, of complications from a stroke. At her funeral, her body lay in a white lace gown, her lips painted scarlet. There were no paparazzi, no studio heads, just a handful of friends and loyal staff. She was buried in Brooklyn, far from the Hollywood she had both conquered and outlived. After her death, something remarkable happened. Feminist scholars reevaluated her legacy. They called her the first woman to use humor as armor. Universities taught her films as early blueprints of gender resistance. Queer communities celebrated her as a patron saint of self-invention. Drag performers quoted her lines verbatim, her voice living on in underground clubs and cabarets. The woman Hollywood tried to silence became immortal through imitation. Her influence is everywhere if you know where to look, in the confidence of Marilyn Monroe, in the swagger of Madonna, in the unapologetic power of modern performers like Lady Gaga or Beyoncé. Every time a woman commands a stage and controls her image, a little echo of May's laugh can still be heard. What makes her story tragic isn't downfall, it's solitude. She achieved everything she dreamed of, yet spent her last decades living inside her own legend, isolated from the world she changed. Power protected her, but it also imprisoned her. She had built herself into a myth so strong that Mae West, the woman, disappeared inside Mae West, the symbol. But that's the paradox of her brilliance. She never waited for permission to exist. She forced the world to make room for her, and in doing so, she paid a price few could bear. She once said, "I'll never love another man. I love myself too much." It sounded like arrogance, but perhaps it was survival. For a woman born in 1893 to live unashamed, unmarried, and untamed, that was revolution enough. So when we remember Mae West today, we remember not just the diamonds and the laughter, but the courage behind them. The courage to be loud when silence was expected, to flirt with censorship, to turn jail into publicity and heartbreak into wit. She was both mask and mirror, revealing a truth Hollywood still wrestles with. That power, especially for women, always comes with a price. She was punished for independence, censored for wit, and mocked for aging, all for the same reason she was adored. Because she dared to be herself. And maybe that's the real tragedy, that the world still struggles to handle a woman who refuses to apologize for existing in full color. Mae West's diamonds may have lost their sparkle, but her defiance never did. She lived once. She did it right. And she made sure the world never forgot her name. If stories like this speak to you, stories of rebellion, resilience, and the price of power, stay with us. Because in every legend like Mae's, there's always another truth waiting where no spotlight reaches.